Joe coming in? He needs to come up here. Joe, come up. Can you move Mike a little bit more?
Sure.
So we have another chair.
There's plenty of chairs. There's lack of space.
Yeah, there's another chair. Yeah, there's another chair here.
Hello. We got you a space.
Oh, yeah.
Uh-oh.
Well, it's just people's names.
How are you?
Hey, Joe, how are you?
So that picture was
Yes.
not taken at Ida. That picture was taken June 8th.
I remember you mentioning
So that's like something like, it's not a,
that. June 8th, that was a flash flood or?
Uh,
Heavy rain?
June
What
8th.
year?
That's a catwalk. That's behind my house on the corner of Meadowbrook and Glenwood. That's not Ida, by the way. That's June 8th. So that shows you the flooding that happens still happens. It's not a hurricane there. That's June 8th of 2021. Glenwood, you know where the island where there's the one way? Glenwood, Millburn Ave, and Meadowbrook.
And the water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's Arlene Pomerantz used to live there, and that was their catwalk, that thing that's floating right there. So I went and grabbed that. There's a creek
Come on.
behind the house.
All right. Good evening, everybody. We're going to get the meeting started. This is being live streamed on YouTube. This is the April 13th, 2023 meeting of the Flood Mitigation Advisory Committee with a particular focus on the Van Winkle, which is the Glenwood and Washington areas of the township. I'm going to figure out how to advance this. I'm not. So tonight's agenda is we're just going to go through a quick committee overview, history of flooding in Millburn, why and where it floods, aggravating factors, constraints, completed mitigation improvements, potential solutions, current and future improvements, plans and expectations, and then a Q&A. This is all, again, sort of having a particular focus on the Van Winkle Brook, which impacts the Glenwood and the Washington areas of the township. So just so everybody's aware, back in 2021, the Township Committee created the Flood Mitigation Advisory Committee, and all these fine people that are here tonight have been working very, very hard and diligently to work through these issues. The group consists of Mayor Maggie Miggins, Deputy Mayor Sanjeev Vinayak, and residents Vic Bennis, Joe Esposito, Miriam Christoy, Jim McKenna, Mike Roberts, Niraj Nagpal, and Sarah Sherman. My name is Alex McDonald, I'm the business administrator of the township, and we have Martha Callahan, who is the township engineer, also participating. The statement of purpose of this Flood Mitigation Advisory Committee is to identify potential solutions with the help of professionals, mobilize community involvement in flood control matters and funding concerns, address funding issues with the governing body, provide pertinent information to residents, and serve in an advisory capacity to the Township Committee on Flood Control Matters. And again, this is something that Millburn has experienced flooding for as long as it has existed. And this is something new for the municipality in recognizing that, creating a group that is focused on this problem and focused on this issue. And I think has shown a great deal of success in the short time that it's been in existence. And again, just a fantastic group of individuals that have been a part of this committee. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Sherman, who's going to go through a little bit of the history of flooding in Millburn.
Thank you. Good evening. So this slide highlights some of the years that where we know that we had significant flooding in the township. Historical records indicate a flood in 1899 before the development of the town. I'm going to 1938 when 6 inches of rainfall in July and a September hurricane flooded the east and west branches of the Rahway in South Mountain, Glenwood, and downtown. It was reported there was flooding in areas that had never flooded previously, like the Canoe Brook Country Club and Sagamore Road. And the town was cut off by water on 3 sides. Glenwood residents were among those calling for immediate action, and the item even listed the names of all the families who were directly impacted by the flooding. A $10,000 expenditure for storm drains in Glenwood and a sewer study were proposed, and the town commissioned engineering reports. There was a coalition of towns formed to address flooding, and it was hoped that there would be a WPA project that might address flood mitigation in the future. A storm in 1944 caused East Branch flooding and wind damage, but received less attention in the local newspapers. Obvious reasons, the focus was on the war. In the 1960s, there were several flood events. A drainage project was proposed for the eastern end of the South Mountain neighborhood in 1962, but this was rejected by residents because the township would have assessed the affected properties. In 1968, 3 inches of rain flooded downtown Millburn. And in 1969, a tornado-like storm caused damage in the Wyoming section. 1985 brought Hurricane Gloria, 3 inches of rain in 24 hours. I know that doesn't sound like much. 1987, 4 inches of rain and an unnamed storm required the evacuation by rowboat from a business on Millburn Avenue. July 24th and 25th, 1997. This one I remember. 9 inches of rain fell over 28 hours, resulting in significant flood damage and losses totaling $3 million. And following this, the town constructed a dike, which is between Oval Road and Horan Circle in the South Mountain area. Hurricane Floyd, September 1999, 8.5 inches of rain affecting 500 residential properties and 90 commercial properties. It's following that the building of the flood wall on Ridgewood Road was proposed, and the raising and widening of the Vauxhall Bridge, which residents may remember. August 2011, Hurricane Irene produced 8.92 inches of rain, and for many residents was just a repeat of the Floyd experience. A year later, we didn't have flooding in Superstorm Sandy, but the wind really wreaked havoc in our community. That brings us to the recent past and Tropical Storm Ida in 2021. Rainfall was measured at 7.94 inches, which is slightly less than a 100-year flood of 8.66 inches. Many of us experienced the devastating effects of this storm on our residences and on commercial property, and this committee was created as a result and is the first time that Millburn Township has made flooding a priority, as Mr. McDonald pointed out. The data indicate that climate change is resulting in more powerful storms and heavier rainfall in our last experience in a relatively short period of time. Property damage is extensive and losses are substantial. We need to anticipate and prepare for this, given Millburn's history of flooding. In the news today, I'm sure you all saw the report that in the Fort Lauderdale area, they are experiencing a 1,000-year flood event. And it's not a hurricane, it's not a storm, it's just rain. So this is some background on flooding in Millburn Township. And I will turn this over now to my colleagues to discuss Glenwood and Washington.
Thank you. So the reason that we experience flooding in Millburn is because, quite simply, water flows downhill, and we have several low points in town. And 3 of those low points are actually riverbeds where the water flows through as it makes its way south of town. The first one is the west branch of the Rahway River, which runs through downtown and Taylor Park. The second one is the east branch of the Rahway River, which is by Vauxhall Road and Millburn Avenue. And then the third one that we'll talk about today is the Van Winkle. Each of these areas is where the township experiences the most severe flooding in a storm. And the reason, quite simply, is that the water accumulates into the river faster than the river can move it away, and it extends over its banks. If you go to the next slide, please. And if we look specifically at the Van Winkle area, the runoff that has to be processed is basically almost all of the Short Hills section, basically from the top of White Oak Ridge Road through most of the area up to Glenwood School and over to about where St. Rose Church is. All of that runoff has to either go through the Van Winkle stream or a conduit that runs by the Short Hills Apartments and under Millburn High School. So that's a large area for water to drain, and when it comes down quickly, it accumulates quickly. The old approach for handling runoff was to get into storm sewers, get into floodways, and get in the river as fast as it can and get it out of here. As there's been more development, more roofs and pavement, parking lots, that left less ground to absorb the water and act as a sponge. And people realize that does not scale. It leads to more flooding. So the modern approach for handling runoff is to try to delay it, slow the flow into the rivers. That leads to things like green space along the rivers. They provide some natural flood barriers, also detention and retention ponds. You see new construction with the townhomes, things like that. There's often large areas for a water to pool during a storm, and then so that it can dissipate slowly over time into the surrounding waterways. And there are a number of key factors. As you heard Sarah say, that some storms didn't seem like a lot of rain, but it led to flooding. That can come from a rapid rainfall. It can also come from the conditions. If the soil is particularly dry, it tends to run off quickly. If it's also saturated, then also things will run off quickly, and it takes less rain to overwhelm the riverbeds. And obviously, a big factor for us is the development over the decades. More development here in New Jersey leads to more runoff more quickly, trying to get through these rivers that run through town. So what we looked at specifically, we tried to leave no stone unturned. So we looked at opportunities for improvement across several dimensions. Prevention, is there anything we can do to actually prevent flooding? That's a challenge these days, given the limited amount of free space that we have here to store water. But we did, look wherever possible to come up with solutions like that and analyze them. We also looked for ways to mitigate the impact. So if we're going to flood, how do we make sure it's not as severe as it could be otherwise, or also how we can recover more quickly with less effort and cost. And one of the next phases we'll be looking at is floodplain management. Accepting the fact that we live in a floodplain, are there things we should be doing a bit differently from land planning, use, zoning, that sort of thing. So that's one of the next phases we'll be getting to. And the other comment that I'll make before I turn it over is constraints. As we look at the different types of solutions available for us, there are a number of constraints that we have to work with. The two most that impact the Glenwood and Washington sections is the regulations, right? There's only so much that we can do to erect walls on rivers because we need permits from the state. If we could put walls up and prevent flooding, the people upstream would do the same thing and we'd get more of their flood water. So they're looking at it from a regional perspective, and they put some limitations on what we can do. The other key constraint for us is the scale of the solution needed. When you look at the amount of water that comes through in a flood, it's a lot of water. So talking about a storage solution or a way to get that through the area more quickly, but also not present another flooding problem downstream, those are some of the constraints and challenges that we need to take in mind as we look at different solutions. Over to Martha, our township engineer, for some history on what this area has experienced in the past and improvements that have been made over the years.
So tonight we're concentrating on the Van Winkle Brook area, the Glenwood section. This is bordered by Short Hills Avenue on one side, on the east, Millburn on the south, and the Morse Essex Turnpike on the west side. And because I work here, I have access to the archives, and we have some really great maps from a long time ago. And one of the things that I found was a map, had no date on it, but it did have, it showed, and you'll see up there in pale yellow, I highlighted it, didn't come out very well, but that is Campbell Pond. And the map that I found, there was absolutely no development in that whole section between Short Hills Avenue, Millburn, and Morris Turnpike. There was nothing. There wasn't a house. So this was all forested still, and there was a big pond, and there were streams that went up to where the Arboretum is now, up that big hill. And so there may not, and I'm guessing there might not have been as much flooding at that time because it was covered with landscaping, with trees, and there were no roads, there were no houses, so everything was nice. So that was, as I continued to look through the maps, I found a map from 1909 that started showing little streets cutting in here and there with all the names that you see up there. So that was in 1909. They started, I don't know who owned the property. It could have been Stuart Hartshorn. I'm not really sure, but they started figuring out how can we develop this area. So you begin to see all of the little side streets that come off of Short Hills Avenue, Pine Terrace, Ridge. They were all shown in there. And as the next map that I found that progressed was an actual subdivision map from 1925 that showed all of the streets with all the little parcels. So you knew that the houses were coming. So, and once you start building streets, you have to start collecting that rainwater. It's got to go somewhere. You can't just run down the street. It's got to be collected. And so I'm not exactly sure. I have not been able to find the history or any topo information. We know that the pond was there, so obviously it got filled in. But after that, I don't really know like how they collected. They collected the runoff from the streets. They put it into inlets, put it into pipes, and they just piped it to the nearest conveyance, the nearest stream. So going back to what Sarah was talking about, the storms, it was the 1938 storm, I think, was the impetus for putting in the express sewer that everyone knows comes down Woodland, goes across Wellington, and then comes into that open channel near Joe's house on Glenwood. And that, so I did find mapping from that time. It was like 1939 that they put that diversion works in. And I think that did help. But then as we progressed, we found there were some storms where that would actually top over and it would affect the homes down in the Cosgrove area on Oakview and Oak Hill and down in that section. So we added, and that was in, let me see,
1974.
1974, they supplemented that diversion works with another layer of another basin with a wall. And that really acts as the overflow for the diversion works. The diversion works is a 5.5 foot diameter pipe. It's a closed system, so we don't, that's why we call it an express sewer. It goes down, it's closed until it gets to the brook. There's no other pipes tapping into that. So it's only taking that stream that goes along Chatham Road from the Arboretum. It's taking all of that runoff, which of course comes from the north side of the railroad tracks. So that's when we have these major events and the diversion works just can't handle it. We had to put in that additional, I say we, I wasn't here in 1974, but that's when the town added that overflow pipe. And then from there, they found that as it came down and it went through what we now call Van Winkle Brook, it goes underneath Millburn Avenue, and they found that that area needed attention. So it was in the 70s.
74.
74.
Supplemental drawing.
Yes. When Essex County got involved and they constructed a big vault, which is It's actually in the sidewalk, underneath the sidewalk in front of the building that is Caldwell Banker now. Used to be a King supermarket right there. Do you remember that?
I did.
How old are you?
Alex got rid of it. It was too old.
Oh. So that vault, they installed, constructed an elliptical pipe, goes into the vault. They also took another pipe that comes out from the Glenwood, from that pipe underneath the street that was already existing. And it pours all that into the open channel that is on the south side of our parking lot 14. So from there, goes across Short Hills Avenue and into the area behind the high school. And it also joins, if you can see on the other side of Short Hills Avenue and in this, what I did was I took the outline and as much to scale as I could, I scaled it on our existing township map. So you can see the actual streets that used to be covered by Campbell's Pond. But across Short Hills Avenue, next to St. Rose, where Short Hills Gardens is, there was another little pond over there. That was collecting water from underneath the train tracks. So when Short Hills Gardens was approved by the Township Committee, we had no planning board in 1949. So the Township Committee approved the construction of the Short Hills Gardens apartments. And at that time, before they were constructed, there was just little streams that meandered through that property. They couldn't build apartment buildings on top of those little streams. So they said, aha, we'll channel it and we'll stick that in a big pipe and let that go under Millburn Avenue. So over the years, no one really paid too much attention to that channel, but eventually we discovered that we were supposed to be maintaining it, the township. And so last year, we completed the reconstruction of that channel. So, and I think it's an improvement over what was there because the DEP had us put in all kinds of vegetation alongside the channel, so that will help to slow the flow of the water. So that's about it for the history of this area, bringing us up to the current.
You have to walk around. I'm expert here. And there you are.
Right, so
Okay, so the next slide is regarding recent Van Winkle improvements and next steps. Again, in 2022, revitalized the woodland diversion, streamlining flow to diversion pipes, the removal of silt and debris and storm sewer at Meadowbrook. Most of these are in reaction to Ida and things that occurred during that storm. We sealed the manhole number 1 on Oakview Terrace. A lot of these would pop during large storm events, and being able to, contain that water into the system was important. Some of the ideas that we've considered that didn't have a significant impact was the detention space in the Hartshorn Arboretum. It's uphill; it's too small. There's a great deal of water detention that is needed in this area to be able to have a significant impact and have an impact on the flooding that occurs downstream. Some ideas that are currently under consideration by this group and have not been fully vetted or explored, but just to have an understanding that, as Jim had mentioned at the beginning, there are these 3 main areas that we understand that severe flooding takes place in the municipality, and there are various different ideas and explorations that are occurring in each of those areas. And some ideas you run into a dead end very quickly, and some take a little bit further exploration and a little bit further work. And so these are just some of those things that are occurring right now regarding the Van Winkle and the Glenwood and Washington area. Detention space adjacent to the Glenwood School, detention space along Van Winkle and Washington section. This would be down toward the New Jersey American Water property. Revised storm sewer trunk north of Hobart to Van Winkle at Old Short Hills Road, and improved and rerouted storm sewers. Again, none of this has been engineered or anything, but when you sort of sit in the we'll call it the think tank, you're throwing ideas out and you're thinking of things that might end up being a potential solution, and you have to go through that exercise on each of those to make sure that you've done as much due diligence as you possibly can. And so that's what is currently taking place. Home elevation options in this area. Some of this has been occurring in the South Mountain area. We currently have 3 applications before FEMA to elevate homes in South Mountain. It is a grant program. It's generally a 75-25 distribution, in which the grant covers 75% of the cost of the home elevation and the homeowner is responsible for 25%. Sometimes it can be more, but in our particular example, it is a 75-25 breakdown. The home elevation program has been utilized in other flood-prone communities such as Cranford, and you can see that what the idea is that it's the elimination of a basement, it's elimination of a living space in harm's way, raising those homes above a certain flood elevation to prevent loss of property, loss of life, things like that. And so again, currently have 3 of those going on in South Mountain, and certainly an option in some of the harder hit areas in the Glenwood area. Enclose the stream behind Meadowbrook Road. I think, as you saw on the previous slide, this was something that was previously explored and rejected. Generally, what we've seen in projects that involved specific improvement to specific properties, the township has always taken the approach of an assessment against those properties for that improvement. It's a very convoluted process, convoluted calculation, but that thought process, that mindset has began to change, and that's how we found success in South Mountain and doing a few drainage projects there, and that is something that could further be explored here in the Glenwood area. Floodplain management, revised building codes, Blue Acres. So again, some of the things that need to catch up with and the importance of this group and what they've been doing is not only the education for the public, but also what will be a focus on land use and building codes and things that can help perpetuating these issues of loss of property in basements or loss of mechanical equipment, things like that, and maybe bringing our codes up to a standard that helps prevent those things. And Blue Acres is something that was thrown out after Ida, in which there is a home acquisition program through the state. If individuals are looking to vacate a home that has been flooded or has a history of flooding, there is a program through the state that would help in the acquisition of those homes. The caveat to that is that they generally like to see a cluster, as they call it, of homes that would provide a more significant sort of mitigation or area in which floodwaters can then go. One-off sort of, programs, I call it like jack-o'-lantern teeth, where you have one home that's out and then 2 homes that are in, is not what they're looking for in this program. But this was something that was also put out to the South Mountain residents, to all residents after Hurricane Ida, and is always a possibility in next steps and improvements. Me too. So just some expectations when it comes to flood mitigation. And as you hear, we consistently use that word, mitigation. We do not use flood elimination because eliminating flooding is near impossible. And mitigation is what we strive for, and being able to prevent, again, property damage, loss of life, things like that. And so that has to be an expectation as all of us look to educate ourselves and be activated in this space of flooding, is to understand that elimination is not the goal. I mean, certainly if you could achieve it, it would be, but it is not achievable. Options for further improvement are limited, as Jim had explained. You have DEP regulations, you have scale, you have costs, you have, again, the federal government uses a benefit cost ratio, which is something that is important as you think about large scale improvements that may not have a large scale benefit. And so you always have to factor those things in. We seek to identify and evaluate every potential opportunity. As I was just saying, you're throwing things out. You're in a think that you're trying to figure out what might work. No idea is a bad idea, but you could run into dead ends very quickly. Each opportunity will be analyzed for impact, feasibility, and cost, and we will keep you informed as we progress. The township currently has a flood page. The goal initially, and again, one of the most important parts of this group and what has been done since Ida is not hiding from the fact that Millburn floods, right? Letting people know, letting people educate themselves about flooding and about the areas in the town that do flood and how to prevent flooding around their home, or how to mitigate flooding around their home, or how to protect themselves, or how to prepare. All of that education is immensely important. And has gone a long way even in the short time. So not only does the Flood Mitigation Advisory Committee have its page, which you can find this information, previous reports, previous meetings, things like that, but there's also a flood page that provides all the materials that we have gathered and all of the information that we have gathered regarding flooding and flood preparedness.
So, Alex, before you go to the next slide. So, thank you, Alex. This team has been meeting every 2 weeks ever since they've been instituted. And they have done a tremendous job in analyzing and trying to get those questions and concerns and comments and figure out every which way that we are flooding. And the bottom line to that, what we figured out is there is 3 different routes that we get flooded from. That was the east branch, west branch of Rahway River that actually gets together down at the South Mountain. And then there is Van Winkle. So we had public session last time, a couple weeks ago, was with East Branch, specifically focused on that. Now we are having it for Van Winkle. A few weeks later, I think in June, we are having for the West Branch. The overall analysis is water runs down and we have some pond area in our town and they will get flooded. Either we slow down the water coming down or we fasten the process of water going away from those areas. So bringing the water slowly down is where it starts from different towns, and that's where Rahway River Mayor program has been happening for over a decade now. What we started doing is whatever is in our power, whatever we can do as a township is what we started doing it. And that's where when we say there's a thought process change or mindset change, we did the drainage program last year and still doing this year or got approved last year. We're working on it. I think it's almost done. There were 3 drainage programs. 2 were approved. Third one, residents. We did not get feedback from the residents back enough to get those approval for the 3rd drainage program. I believe with the way the 2 drainage programs are working or projects are working, the residents are seeing those projects been working fine, and we are hopeful to get the 3rd one approved as well for this year. That helps not slowing down the water, it helps quickly draining the water out from those areas, from those backyards where the flooding happened, or even for the rain, the water gets accumulated, it kind of runs fast from there. Or drainage pipe were smaller, we made it bigger. We are trying to work on a bigger project with some other towns where the water coming down could be retained or bring the water level down from the retention right now, put in bigger pipes, get the water out quickly from there, like a couple days prior to whenever we feel the Ida or any kind of those storm happening. So that way, if the water is taken out of that retention, they will have more space to hold the water right there. So it will not come down so quickly. Out of all this, the easiest way of doing or handling this is home elevation program because it's at an individual level. And as we keep going further and further, then it becomes the township level, and then it becomes the county level or different towns level. So wherever the ponds are, the water is not going to stop coming. So how quickly the water drains out there or comes out there is totally up to Almighty, I guess. But how quickly we get it out, that's one. But if the river is already full with water coming down that route and it's still raining, all the water will hit the same place and come back. So what this team has actually met another town where the home elevation had happened. And it happened similarly where it started with 3 home application first. And then the second round of application was much higher. Third round of application was even higher. So people who live in those areas that are more like pond areas or places where water really gets accumulated, I think it's highly recommended to apply for the home elevation program. At least you're up high and homes do not look bad. We've seen the homes, we talked to the homeowners who actually live there. So even though there is flooding around your house, you're still safe, you're still up above water level, and there will be some side effects where you will not have access to your basement or not that many things you can keep in the basement, but at least you and your home are safe and you're still in the township. And I think that individual level is where you can make a lot of difference, where state is taking care of 75%. And I think first round was also 75% in another town, and it went up to 90% in the second or third round. I'm not sure if that is going to go down that way for us, but that is one thing that everyone should look into. And this team, again, kudos to them, along with Mayor Megan sitting right there. She's also part of the team. Great work. Thank you, and thank you so much. So now we can go into questions, Mr. McDonald.
Sure. All right. So this is sort of more informal. It's a small group, and part of the reason that we wanted to have in-person meetings and where we were having Zoom meetings last year, we wanted to interact with the individuals that are being impacted by flooding and answer their questions. And so a little bit more informal here, but certainly try to keep your focus on things that are related to the mitigation along Van Winkle. Limit of 1 question per person initially. Again, we have a few people here. Additional follow-up questions once everybody's had their chance. And as always, just a reminder, be respectful. But certainly at this time, if anybody has any questions or wants to speak or just vent or speak their mind, certainly feel free.
Good evening, folks. Dave Cosgrove. And first of all, thank you for doing this. But I live on the Oakview Terrace, the very end, right next to we call it the Waterworks or the Green Bridge or whatever. But it looks like on the slides, it's Culvert 1 and Culvert 2, I think, are the two we're talking about. So I had like a question and I had like 3 suggestions. So Alex, should I just do it? Okay, and I'll keep it short. So suggestion-wise, Culvert 1, which is the upper detention basin, there is the wall that's goes along Woodland Road. Does not have a wall there. It's just dirt. It's a dirt grade. And I thought that if we completed the wall on that side, that might make a difference. You might get a little more storage up there. And on the lower detention basin, or Culvert 2, that does flood every now and then. And the town's doing a wonderful job keeping after that now. More so than when we first moved in. I think back in '88 we moved in. So I think that's helped a lot. But that lower detention basin, I'd love to see those sandbags gone and the wall itself made larger. I had 2 thoughts on that, but I'll defer to experts on this because I'm not an engineer. If that wall were made taller, you might be able to redirect that flood route, which goes between those houses when it does overflow, onto Woodland. and just let it disperse onto Woodland Avenue. Assuming, this is my assumption, that's not going to create another problem for somebody else on Woodland. You know, you'd have to see where those pipes connect and all that. The fourth thing is as you go along Chatham Road and you follow the brook up towards Glenwood School, but along Chatham Road, there's a good bit of land there that I think the town probably owns from other investigations I've done. That maybe could be dug out to make a larger channel, you know, for more storage. So those are the suggestions if they make sense. And then the question I had was based on Martha, one of your comments, was the upper detention basin, again at the end of Oakview, and the lower detention basin. Where do those two pipes, after they go underground, where do they go? And are there other pipes that connect into them? So thank you.
Well, what is called the upper detention basin, culvert 1, I call that the diversion works.
Okay.
So that was the one that was constructed first, and that has the big pipe that goes straight down, and that takes a turn. That's the express sewer. So that goes out onto Woodland, it goes down Woodland, across Wellington, and down into Glenwood, where it's in the open channel portion of Glenwood, the divided street. The other pipe is, I call that the overflow pipe. So if the diversion works is not keeping up with the flow, it tops over that wall and it ends up going into the 42-inch pipe, which is an overflow. And that goes straight down between the houses on Oakview and Woodland. So there is a pipe that goes down through there, and there's that was where the manhole surcharged and we had it welded shut. But that's where, and then that makes its way out to Woodland, but they're two parallel storm sewer systems. The express sewer has no connection into it. So they just run parallel down Woodland Road, and they end up in the same place. So they all come together and end up going underneath Millburn Avenue. So.
Michael Cohen. I just would like some more information. We're talking about a possible solution of a diversion pond, I guess, adjacent to the Glenwood School. Where were you intending to put that?
Oh, I think that we were looking at maps, and the township owns a parcel of property that is directly behind the fields at Glenwood School.
Right.
It's all forested and it's never
Yes.
been touched. But it was looked at as being, well, there's a place the town owns. Why can't we use that? It's actually uphill from where our problem is. So
That's what I was going to ask you if you were aware that Taylor Road
Yeah.
South is flat for a few houses,
Right.
but then it rises.
right.
And that land is part of the rock where it rises.
Exactly. And that currently, anything that hits that hillside currently runs down and it ends up on Morris Avenue, and it goes across Morris in it's like in a different watershed area than what we're talking about tonight. So it ends up going over to Springfield or Summit. I don't know exactly what town it hits when it goes across
Okay.
Morris, but yeah, that'd be tough to try and, first of all, dig that out and make it a detention basin. We'd lose a lot of trees, we'd do a lot of excavating, but we'd have to get the water up to it. And then we're diverting water that currently is in the Van Winkle watershed, and we're sending it to a different watershed. I don't know if Summit would appreciate that.
And just a clarification, when you talked about that second retention that runs under the Arboretum and whatnot, that's the same pipe that runs all the way along Chatham Road to Lupine? Is that,
Yes.
that's all part of the same system?
Yes, that's how, that goes directly into the diversion works.
Okay, thank you.
And just so everyone knows, Michael Cohen is also a township committee member. Thank you.
Taylor Road South. So
Taylor
I'm
Road
not
South.
concerned about a diversion pond.
Yeah,
I have higher ground in my house.
I think that you actually, the flow from your property goes across to Summit. It doesn't come down this way.
I'm on the lower part, so it goes
Yes.
toward the Chatham culvert.
Well, interesting thing, I found a map where are you beyond the school then? You're at the
Directly
cul-de-sac?
across from the parking lot of the school.
Oh, okay. If you, at one point, Taylor Road ended right about where the school
Right.
is.
Those other houses. are
And-
much newer.
yes, those houses at the dead end at the cul-de-sac are newer. Well, I found a map that showed that to be a possible Green Acres municipal park area. So the town at one time looked at that. It's almost 4.5 acres. And it is wetlands back in there too. There's a lot of little streams through there, but would have been a nice thing to have, but somewhere along the line it got sold and developed, and so there's several homes out there now, but.
Thank you. So we have walked through what Mr. Carlsgrove has talked about in Glenwood area a little while back, about a year ago, and we saw those sacks lying around. What he just suggested on making the wall, or a little wall, did we ever think that through, or have we ever had that conversation?
We have talked about it. I think the new idea that I heard was that to divert when it does overflow, to try to channel it in a certain direction. I think that's something we should take a look at.
And how about the wall?
The water will still be there, so it might cause other problems. It's one of the things we'll have to assess. The wall, from what I've heard from a resident that lives right on, it must be one of your neighbors. As soon as the water starts to hit, those sandbags get knocked over. So I don't think they're serving any purpose. It's
Right.
certainly makes sense to remove them. Whether we can heighten the wall is, I think, a question for what kind of
Yeah, we
regulations
would-
would impact us there.
We'd have to look into that and see if we could even do it.
That is within the town purviews. It's not going to another town. So that is what we can do in here if it makes sense. I think it's a good idea. Whether it cannot be a very high wall, but at least some, if that doesn't look bad and if that is.
It would
The
look
height-
better than sandbags.
Absolutely, absolutely. The height of the wall, if it's a big storm, it'll buy you a couple minutes. It's not going to have a big impact. If it's a storm where it gets just over the wall for a period of time, but doesn't get any worse, then that could buy. So it'll be a fairly limited impact in terms of the benefit that it can have, but it's worth considering.
Yes, Mr. Cosgrove? Sure.
On the concept of making that lower wall taller and any regulations, it actually was made about 6 inches taller
At one
Right.
point.
15 years ago or something like that. So at some point the town added.
Yeah, which kind of indicates why would they only add 6 inches? So it could have been within a certain parameter.
Mr. Cosgrove, I'm sorry, I missed where was the retention area you suggested we consider? You said there's some space available?
No, he mentioned diverting it down Woodland Road.
No, but the
No,
retention
the-
place he was
along-
talking about.
Around Loop Line?
Between
Oh,
Blue
yeah.
Line and
Along
Chatham.
Chatham.
Here,
Was the stream that parallels Chatham, basically.
so
That could be made wider.
this right here. So I'm just showing everybody this is the township's SDL site, which offers various layers that can be looked at by residents. And so this is what he is describing right now.
And where can we make the retention?
Here, making this wider, this current stream.
Wider.
Also
Deeper.
upstream of that.
Yeah, this green space is township property.
Got it. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hi, Eileen Schofield. First of all, thank you so much for looking to all of this. It's great. Just along the same time that what Dave was just talking about, widening it would be really good, but also maybe even dredging it. You know, any amount of extra water. I know I listened to part of your March 30th and there was some civil engineer going, dredge, 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 dredge. That sounded good to me, but I'm not an engineer. But that is a hole from all the way from Glenwood all the way down. If you dredged that and made it bigger, it would just be so much better when it came down to our area, into that diversion works. You know, the less force into the diversion works, the less into the overflow. You don't want to have anything into that overflow. Hopefully, you know, it should be like a toilet, like a bathtub. Nothing goes into that thing.
Right.
And I know there's another wall, and I know the sandbags, but I think there's another wall that would prevent things to go into the overflow in the first place. So I don't know whether it looks like it got cut out.
Yes. At one point, they did do a couple of cutouts.
Yes, I wonder if they could just put it across and make it higher or something like that. I don't know, I'm trying to not have it go into the overflow. That's the problem.
You
I
have
have
the
you-
property that with the surcharging
Yes.
manhole, right?
Yes,
But it's welded down,
yes,
correct?
yes.
Okay.
But, no, I was not my property, it's nearby.
But it
Yes,
affected your
yes,
property?
Yes.
Okay.
So I don't want anything going in that overflow. So if you can divert it further up, that would be great. And the other thing that is a really simple solution, and I've been emailing the engineering department for a year, is on Oakview and Inwood, we have all these beautiful Belgian blocks that make a natural flow into the sewers. And for some reason, people have put their driveways over the Belgian blocks, and it comes to a screeching halt.
And pushes it out to the street.
And pushes it out to the street and down people's driveways. So can that be looked into? I mean, especially on Oakview, since it was a problem. Things were not getting into the sewers, things were going down driveways. That's an easy solution. You just tell them, look, I forget you graded or matted or, I don't know what the word is.
Mill it.
What is it?
Mill.
Mill, that's the word. Mill it. Just mill it a little bit. I don't think the pipes underneath really work because they all get clogged.
The problem is that we don't, in a lot of those driveways, there's not a lot of clearance to put a big, good sized pipe under it. You need at least under a driveway, like at least a 6-inch pipe.
Oh, no.
And sometimes they only have,
Oh, right,
4-inch
there's
pipe,
little things.
and they get plugged up so easily
Right.
that they become ineffective.
But I say
So
just keep the Belgian block.
it would be nice.
I mean,
but
I would think the town would require them to. I mean, apparently they're getting
if we
permits.
know that they're doing.
I don't
doing
know,
it,
some
we-
people are getting permits to do it and they just plow.
They're-
I don't
they're-
know.
They're not getting permits to do that.
They're not getting, okay, well, maybe that's.
So I
something we
think,
could look
so I
into.
think again, and I appreciate your point, because this is not just a Oakview Inwood issue, particularly in the Glenwood section. You see this is apparent on Meadowbrook as well and other streets there. Part of the issue is that a lot of those roads have a depressed curb prior to entry into the driveway, which is why people are looking to bridge it in some way or fill that with macadam or asphalt to get into their driveway. And so this is something, as we continue to go down our road reconstruction project, we're actually looking at roads in a holistic way, right? Not just saying, oh, we're going to mill it and pave it and that's it. So we're looking at those roads not only from a mill and pave standpoint, but also from a curbing, from a drainage, from all of those various aspects that go into a roadway and the reconstruction of that. So certainly something as we go through that, because kind of doing one-offs and hitting them one at a time may not be very efficient or practical. But when we go and we say, look, we're gonna repave Oakview Terrace. Now, as we come through there, we're ripping all this stuff out. We're creating the curbs the way they should be. We're creating the entry into the driveways they should be. And then nobody touches it, and kind of back to the point of, not allowing for those things to go forward.
Okay, I was looking at it as an economical, just have everybody do their own and everybody's, so the town isn't responsible for it.
Well, we're responsible for the road,
Right,
right?
that's-
So,
Okay,
yeah.
good, that sounds good. And just at the end, along where Dave said to do that, on Chatham Road, there's like this huge conduit that goes from Chatham Road, like that flows right into that stream instead of going into the gutter on the road. So we're getting like,
Because it ends up in the stream from that.
oh,
you
that
see
gutter
the
goes to the
drainage
stream
inlets?
too?
Yes,
Oh,
it goes into
gosh.
the stream.
So there's nowhere, okay. So I was like, why are they putting more into that? Okay.
And it all ends up in the same place.
Well, I know, that's
Eventually,
why I
it
thought
all
there was a
ends up-
secret spot going that way.
I wish there was.
Well, we need a
No.
pond. We need a
giant
need a
tunnel
pond.
underground.
And I'm thinking that between Glenwood and, the diversion work, a nice pond, like an ice skate, just make it this big, whatever.
Well,
I just-
they haven't started those apartments yet, so.
Well, thanks again for all your
Dig a
help.
hole.
Thanks for listening. Okay.
Can I add to that? Just along,
Just turn your mic on.
yeah, thank you. Just along Chatham Road, I know that comes up a lot, and we as a team looked at it too. The problem in this area is there's such significant amount of volume coming into our diversion work. There's not enough space along Chatham, even the detention basin, to hold it and to release it. And if we do release it, which, dredging or cleaning up the channel, that's going to move the water much faster. And then it's going to dump into Springfield. So there's a lot of problems that, what's coming in, how are we going to hold it, and how we're going to release it. I don't know if that helps answer some of the things. I think, back of the napkin calculations, between all of us, we had, 1 million to 9 million cubic gallon of water that we would need to store in that area. We don't have the space currently, so we're considering so many areas as outlined.
Do they add revegetation within that if they made it, something to hold it back?
Absolutely. I mean, we're looking at every option.
But the other problem is going to be they want to build a huge apartment, they've approved a huge apartment complex right on the diversion roads.
Mhm.
So I don't, I feel like we're spinning on wheels, and I think that's going to be good. So throwing that out there.
They actually are decreasing the amount of impervious coverage that's there right now. I don't know what the number is, but it's actually going to be less impervious coverage, and they're also adding a series of 6 to 8 dry wells. So all the runoff from that property is going to end up going into the dry well system, and if the ground doesn't soak it up, which it will in a normal storm, an everyday kind of a storm, even an inch of rain, it could probably handle 2 inches of rain, and then it will overflow into the stream. Right now, it just goes directly into the little pond that's upstream of the diversion works, where the stream widens out. That's where all the runoff from that site goes right now.
I guess it's just the impervious, you're counting the driveways impervious bit, but they're going to be 5 stories on top.
It doesn't really, it's still the same footprint of coverage,
I know
whether
you
it's
look at it that
a
way.
story or 5 stories, it doesn't matter. It's still same amount of rainfall.
Anybody else?
Thank you for all your work. So I live on Birchwood, and we have the rainfall that comes from the huge parking lot of in Springfield, like the Harmon parking lot. So the rainfall from there comes through the backyards in Birchwood, and they flood us. So I was wondering what's being done to divert the water from that parking lot from Springfield to come into our neighborhood. Can it be diverted going to Springfield and they can absorb it into Morris Avenue?
Well, that is a project that we're looking at, and it's not Springfield, it's Short Hills still.
Okay.
Their property is Short Hills on the other side of Morris Turnpike here in Springfield, but that's part of our township. That's the way the drainage was laid out now, but we're looking into seeing if we can stop it at that point. There's a big inlet on the commercial property that is directly behind Birchwood.
Mhm.
And that pipe does connect into the line that goes behind the homes on Birchwood.
Mhm.
We want to see if we could block that flow off and reverse it and send it out toward Morris Turnpike.
Okay.
We're looking into it. I just haven't done all the detailed work on it yet. I need to go out and get some elevations and get some survey work done first.
Her email is on the website. Follow up with her
Yes.
on that project.
Definitely. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if her email is not there, make sure you write to Jim. He's very good in following up.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll read his name on the way out.
I think truly this wouldn't have been done. All these people, they're residents here, like every one of us, including us. And they've done a tremendous job. And the kind of follow-up and the kind of passion they have, it's really unbelievable. So last time we had the meeting, there were 2 gentlemen, they came up with suggestion. He had his own meeting with them after the fact, just going over what their suggestions were. And actually, in our internal meeting, he brought into the presentation and went over those suggestions and actually looked into further. So the passion is tremendous. Make use of this passion as much as you can in an all positive way. because they are volunteering their time, and I think it's just not good if we are not respectful to them. So thank you again.
Anybody else? So again, before we just wrap up, the Flood Mitigation Advisory Committee has a webpage on the township's website, videos, as well as the presentations, and everything gets posted to that. So, and certainly some of the history of presentations and various things that have happened. Also on the flood page on the township's website. In May, on May 9th, yep, we'll be having a hurricane preparedness meeting. So that's where we invite our OEM team, police, fire, DPW, everybody to come out and speak about how residents can prepare themselves, how we prepare ourselves so that you understand what we do, in particular how we react to storms, and also what we do in preparation for forecasted large events. And so we encourage everybody to come out to that. That will be also streamed as well for residents to view. And again, just appreciate everybody coming out and having this interaction. And certainly we're all here as resources and as for discussion or questions or whatever it may be. So thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I didn't say the rest of it, but thank you all.